This is not going to be a long podcast. Welcome back to Joe Patrick on football. Listen, we just saw a travesty today in Charlotte. The Falcons went up to Carolina to play the Panthers and lost 30 to nothing. An absolute travesty, and it's a shame that it's a shame that Falcons fans have to go through this again. It's happened too much over the last 2 years, especially really under Raheem Morris's tenure. We've seen this team be uncompetitive way too often. They've been uncompetitive in previous years, obviously, as well. It's not like this is the first game, and it's not like other fan bases don't have to deal with games like this from time to time, but it's time to time. It's not several times per season where the team has no chance to win. It's happened too often for a team that's too talented for this kind of thing to happen. And I'm thinking back to last year again in games like at Denver, at home to Seattle. The Seattle one was probably even worse because you're at home, and there's just no reason for you to have to be putting in your backup quarterback in the fourth quarter to finish out that game. But it has happened, and it's happened again today. We see the backup quarterback, Kirk Cousins, come in to finish off this game after, again, just a nothing burger on offense in terms of like literally creating nothing, just doing absolutely nothing, and actually doing worse than nothing because you give away 7 points directly, or 6 points, seven points in a pick six, but also just short fields. You're keeping the defense on the field for too long. This offense lost the game for the team today, and we now have to question what this offense is. I got to hold my hand up and say I haven't really been concerned about this team's offense because I thought that we had a good enough sample size off of. I know that 3 games last year was that's not a big sample size, but what you did see in those 3 games was Michael Penix capable of operating Zach Robinson's offense, executing an offense to the point where you score 34 points literally in your first game. You go up to Washington, you have another great game. I can't remember how many points they scored in that one. I believe it was maybe 24, but it was a pretty good offensive performance there. Then obviously you have a shootout. You score 30 plus points again. I believe they averaged 30 points over the course of the 3 games that Michael Penix played last season. And listen, the signs were not positive coming into this game in week 3 of his second year, his 6th game as quarterback. But he did lead them. He threw for nearly 300 yards in week 1, led them, down the field, gave them a chance to win the game despite not having Darnell Mooney in that game. Some weapons were missing, especially in crunch time. Drake London also leaves. So, and then we saw the team be able to move the ball, obviously ran the ball better in week 2. It was not a great offensive performance, but I never really had concern that this offense that it was possible for them to fall as flat on their face as they fell today. And it's just like the seesaw nature of this Falcons football team, and this predates Raheem Morris, but even going back to the Arthur Smith tenure, just the up one week, down another nature of it. It just happens too much. And, I understand it's the NFL. It's the most competitive league. It's the most competitive sports league in the world across any sport. And I believe that. And I'm not saying that this team should be winning every single game but I am saying that they need to maintain a level of competitiveness at a continual level more often than what they've shown over the last handful of years or so. And it just feels particularly frustrating today against a team where the Falcons were 5.5 points favorites according to Vegas markets. It was a Carolina team that was struggling with injuries, especially across their offensive line. We're not going to talk a lot about the defense today, but they were not able to rush the passer the way that we thought they could after what they did last week. And again, being able to take advantage of those players that Carolina had missing, that was disappointing. But the problems really start on the offensive side of the football that put this team in a hole. And now this offense is just a huge question mark as to what they are going under Zach Robinson. And we'll start with him. We'll just kind of talk about a few areas of the team, and then, like I said, we're not going to spend a whole ton of time on this podcast. But just generally speaking, I know there were some reported. I was not there in Carolina, but apparently there was. It was reported by several who were in the press box that there was some sort of communication that came across the intercom system there inside the press box that stated that the Falcons were having trouble with the headset. And so, listen, like, I do want to give them a little bit of a break on some of these things. Sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do in some of those situations when the call's not getting to the quarterback, and it takes some time for that to actually be communicated from the quarterback back to the coaching staff that he's not receiving the signal properly, and so then you can't run the plays. But that should be something that was sorted out. What we saw happen in this game was routinely throughout almost the entire game, the team breaking the huddle with about 11 to 10 seconds left, or 12 to 10 seconds left, let's say, not getting set at the line until they are sometimes 8 or less seconds left on the play clock. Then you've got a motion that's typically coming on a lot of these plays, at which point there's a natural flow to when that snap happens, and it all just felt way too rushed. It felt like you were not giving your young quarterback, Michael Penix, again, making his 6th start in the NFL, enough time to be comfortable reading a defense, especially given the fact that Carolina was playing with 2 high safeties, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it was kind of a different, a tougher coverage shell maybe for Michael Penix to read, and it would have, I think, benefited him greatly to have some more time at the line of scrimmage, not even just to understand, not to obviously just see the coverage, but just to then think. And when we talk about processing at the line of scrimmage, to be able to think about the play call, think about the route concepts that are going to happen out in front of him, in front of what he's seeing, and just be able to rehearse a little bit in his head before that snap comes. But I felt all day today it was just way too rushed by the time they got to the line of scrimmage, and that's basic operation stuff that you should be able to have sorted out. You should be better at getting to the line quicker and doing some of these things. Remember 2 years ago, we kind of briefly mentioned this in passing on one of these podcasts we've done recently, but we were giving Kevin O'Connell so much credit with the Minnesota Vikings with the job that he did when he had Josh Dobbs come in to Mercedes-Benz Stadium and beat the Falcons. And Josh Dobbs had been on the team for 2 or 3 days, something like that. And they were so good at getting to the line early enough before the 15-second mark when the communication stops between the play caller and the quarterbacks in their radio, that Kevin O'Connell was oftentimes able to see what the Falcons were lined up in and be able to communicate something to Josh Dobbs about where he should be going with the football. I'm not suggesting that Zach Robinson should be doing that with Michael Penix, that there's a need for him to be doing that. But what I am saying is that there's an ability for the team to be much, much, much better operationally, and it's not just Penix. It's also maybe starts with the coaching staff and having the plays thought of, what you're going to call quicker, and be able to relay those down quicker so that you're just not in this kind of pressured situation where you're just trying to get the snap off without getting a penalty, and then the quarterback feeling rushed again in his 6th career start. So that was a frustration of mine watching this game. I gotta say, and I was not, like I said, I was not at the game. So, and when I am at, home games, typically, you are able to see more of the route concepts and have a better understanding of what they're trying to accomplish through the passing game, whether it's successful, whether the ball actually gets thrown to some of the route concepts or not. But I have to say, just watching the game on TV and seeing the replay of where the ball was ultimately thrown and some of the replays, it all seemed very basic, and it seemed to get even more basic as the game went on as to where Michael Penix was going with the football, and the fact that these receivers had very little separation, typically running routes vertically down the sideline, trying to do like a little stop route. They never really pushed the ball really far downfield. Maybe there was one attempt on a potential corner route to David Sills I can think of where the ball actually traveled maybe 25 yards downfield. But other than that, it was just very, very basic stuff, and you never really saw the receivers getting a whole lot of separation. There were a couple of moments where Penix threw in rhythm. And you found a Drake London that had, a softer spot in his zone. There was a time, I think that there were also a couple opportunities or moments where this happened late in the first half, but I don't really count those because Carolina was just sitting off playing prevent defense when the Falcons had a drive that started with about just over a minute remaining. Kyle Pitts catches a ball. Darnell Mooney catches the ball as the clock runs out. The clock management in that situation was poor by the Falcons players that were on the field. Didn't seem to understand that they didn't have a timeout left and that they needed to be more cognizant of trying to preserve the time. They ultimately only got a few plays off on that drive before it ran out on them. But overall, it just felt like the route concepts were quite basic and there was not a lot of separation being created. And Penix contributes to that problem. Again, we'll talk about Penix in a second. I'm just kind of going through the issues with Zach Robinson that I have coming out of this game. I don't feel like Zach did a great job trying to change the dynamic for Michael Penix, for Carolina's defense, in terms of potentially getting him on the move, booting him out of the pocket. Maybe you even do a zone read. Maybe you even do some quarterback design run type of stuff just to keep the defense honest, just to change the picture for them. It just never felt like there was any sort of adjustment made in that sense to try to do something like that. I thought, who knows if that would actually have been successful, but I just felt like it would have done something because it felt like the longer this game went on, felt like Michael Penix grew more frustrated and was just more adamant about receiving the snap, standing in that pocket, and delivering the ball. And that didn't work out well. And also, just my last thing on Zach and just kind of the scheme of offensively of what they're running. Again, out of this pistol offense, and I'm not blaming the pistol offense for this, but they have not run a lot of play action at this point leading up in the season. They didn't run a ton of it today, but I do have to say that whenever they do run the play action, it doesn't feel like the play action is actually, again, changing the picture for Michael Penix. It's not really pulling opposing defenses out of position that helps receivers gain separation. Just doesn't seem to be doing a lot of anything. And again, that's just my opinion, but it feels like the play action is really weak, and maybe that play action could be strengthened if you do, if it's not out of pistol, if you do get under center and just be more versatile in the scheme. So that's it for now. We'll talk to Raheem Morris on Monday and maybe get some more opinions about Zach and maybe how this offensive scheme can improve. And I want to say I'm not like fully out on Zach. I'm not fully out on the scheme because I felt like what the Falcons were doing in Michael Penix's first 3 games was way more creative than what we've seen in the first 3 games of this season. Like, it feels like they've gone backwards in a sense in terms of creative things to get these receivers open. I'm thinking about even that Giants game, Michael Penix's first start. We saw Darnell Mooney receive the ball on some shallow crossing routes, many different types of things. And I'm sure that, the more tape that has been accrued on Penix, and especially over the course of the offseason leading into this season, has made defenses better equipped to deal with him versus, his first 3 starts last year. But it's just really demoralizing to see this offense really just backtracking basically from where they were at that point. Now let's talk about Penix specifically. He's not absolved of blame or criticism in this game. He was very poor. It was concerning to me early in this game to see just some of the ducks coming out of his hand. I mean, there was some throws. He's not under pressure. He didn't get hit. He did get hit some, but there were just some throws that were just not spirals, which is just bizarre to me. And not only were they just not tight spirals like he typically throws, but they were like super wobbly. Like it almost feels unprofessional how like wobbly some of these throws were, and just overall way too inaccurate. And just again, I'll hold my hands up. I've said before, I'm not as concerned about his inaccuracy as some pundits have been, especially like in the pre-draft process, as he was being evaluated as a draft candidate. But today it was just I never thought it was going to be as bad as it could get today. Like just in terms of missing guys who were relatively stationary targets at the point of throwing, and just missing guys. I'm just thinking of especially the throws over the middle, kind of in between the numbers. Just inaccurate, and not a better way to say it. I have kind of said that it's not. I'm not super worried about it because the high value impact plays down the field were going to make up for some of those inaccuracies that he has in the underneath areas. But we're not getting those high value plays. So when you're not getting those, then you cannot have the inaccuracy. And so right now it's kind of the worst of both worlds in that respect for Penix. Also just thought he was telegraphing some of the checkdowns, and that's evidenced by the fact that one of them gets, pick sixth for like 20 yards on a return or whatever it was, a short return as the Falcons were gearing up for another long drive with bad field position. But he was just too often just really telegraphing them, and I thought he was exposing or leaving Bijan Robinson tend to be who it was, sometimes Algier, Charlie Warner one time, just leaving them exposed to get hit really massively as they're trying to secure this catch. And again, maybe part of that is on Zach Robinson as well. It seemed like the checkdowns were of similar nature, like they're all kind of in this wide flat area where there was a corner basically ready to come down hard on those receivers. But I just thought that they were generally very, very telegraphed. And then, I just also thought that he was passing up throws in the middle of the field. And I thought the commentators, Matt Millen, I think he's kind of past it as a commentator. Sad to say, because he seems like a lovely guy. But there were moments where Matt Millen was saying, "Oh, look at these receivers. There's no one open." And I'm thinking, I see two guys open. I see two guys. That's NFL open. And Michael Penix is, I don't know if he's not seeing them or if he's seeing them and thinking, I can't fit the ball in there. I can't imagine he's thinking, I cannot fit the ball in there. I think the most likely thing is that he's thinking, it's not worth taking that risk. Like I don't want to risk throwing it in there at that point in time. But that is not the mentality that you want your quarterback having. And I think if that is the case, it's evidence of him just not really being in a great mental spot right now. And we'll see, but you got to be able to take some of those throws. And I'm not saying that there was a million of them in this game that would have changed it, but there were enough that it made me concerned that he's just passing up opportunities when he has guys open in that middle of the field area. And that's concerning, especially considering, one of his biggest weapons, Drake London, does the vast majority of his work in those areas. And we're not seeing Drake London really get the ball all that much. Nor are any of the receivers getting the ball all that much. None of the receivers have caught a touchdown pass. That includes the tight ends, Kyle Pitts and Charlie Warner. I believe that they now have a combined 4, I think is either 3 or 4 20-plus yard catches. And that's still 0 catches that are of targets that are 15-plus yards down the field. They're creating some of these 20-yard catches because of the yards after catch, but still only, I believe, 4 of those so far this season. It's not good enough. It's obviously unsustainable way to play offense. And ultimately, they're going to have to figure out a way to try to get the ball downfield more, because it was just far too predictable that he was going to be checking the ball down in this game, and ultimately it cost him with the pick 6. Lastly, I think a lot of the problems that the team was having, even in the passing game, was created by the fact that this team could not get the ball moving on the ground once again efficiently enough when Carolina was playing 2 high safeties. I thought there was a chance that Carolina was going to considering how poor they've been stopping the run themselves this year, that they were going to bring a safety down, commit numbers in the box, and say, listen, we've got J.C. Horn, Mike Jackson are two good corners. We're going to bet that they can basically, man up with your receivers, Mooney and London, and we'll take our chances winning that way. Nope, that's not what they did. They kept two high safeties. They kept a very high shell, not really giving many great looks for Michael Penix to try to throw that ball deep. And the Falcons could not punish them for those looks. And ultimately, it is hard to throw into those two high safety shells, that Vic Fangio style look that is becoming ever more popular in the NFL, to the point where Mel Kiper wants to ban it, which is insane. You have to be able to run the football. That's the thing. That's the whole point. And I think that that's where... frankly, I thought that Arthur Smith was kind of ahead of the curve in trying to get back to bigger personnel groupings and running the ball successfully in order to combat this style of defense, seeing that that's the way that things were trending. And, it seemed like that's the way that Zach Robinson was also leaning based on what the Falcons did in week 2 against the Vikings with 87% 12 personnel, and they certainly did run more 12 personnel in this game as well compared to what they did last year, but they were not effective in the running game, and it was concerning to me to see, Bijan Robinson, doing these crazy jump cuts and stuff in the beginning of the game. It felt like he was wanting to bite off a little bit more than he could chew. I know a lot of people were giving Bijan credit as the only player who can walk away with his head held high from this game, but I thought that even he could have done much better in the first half, especially. Again, not that there was a lot there for him, but just just picking up the yards that were available instead of trying to do too much, basically. And I felt like that sometimes left the team in some unfavorable down and distances. But ultimately, just generally speaking, the offensive line takes the brunt of this blame as well, because they were not moving the line of scrimmage. And the Carolina Panthers, frankly, dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, which was also concerning for this defense. Now, we've talked about this defense kind of being built and set up personnel-wise and stylistically as one that plays with a lead, one that plays with a good, productive offense that scores points, and it being able to get after the passer. And they were not able to do that. Dave Canales, credit to him. They did a great job of doing the things that I felt like the Falcons should be doing with Michael Penix in terms of getting Bryce Young, changing his launch point, getting him out of the pocket at times, just giving the defense just a versatile set of looks, mixed looks that can just help the quarterback out, and some that's very schemy, but not very complicated ultimately for the quarterback. And I feel like there's more that can be done there on the Falcon side to help Penix and to keep these defenses a little bit more off-balanced. So that's about it. Do also just want to mention the special teams again. We talk about the seesaw nature of this team and how they've been that way too often these last couple of years. Really disheartening to see the special teams just take a step right back to where they were week 1, maybe even worse than week 1. This is probably actually the worst outing on special teams they've had, really, actually, since I can remember. You missed 2 kicks, and concerningly, this team could not catch a kickoff. I don't even understand how that's possible. There was probably 3 or 4 kickoffs in a row that were just dropped, and I kind of feel bad for Marquise Williams sometimes, because it's I don't know if there's a way to coach this up better that can allow the players to catch the ball more. It did seem like sometimes they were reaching for the ball in certain ways. I was concerned there was going to be a safety on one of them, but I guess there's a rule that you can still miscatch the kick and it goes out of bounds, and it's not a safety. But just very concerning to see that. You had Bradley Pinion kind of muff a punt, or not muff, but just botch a punt that goes for 23 yards. That feels like a turnover at that point. You might as well just be chucking the ball 23 yards downfield. That was brutal. And then maybe the one that wraps it all up, that kind of puts a bow on everything, is you actually tackle yourself on a punt return. which I know is just one of those things that, just happens in the heat of the moment, I'm sure. But it certainly is not a good look, and it certainly did seem to sum up the day for the Falcons. And that's going to sum up this episode of the podcast. I wish it was. I wish it was better, but man, I feel like this is the biggest egg I can honestly remember this team laying. And I'm not saying that it is the biggest egg that they've laid, within the last 30 years or whatever, but it's a game where if you're a playoff contending team, if you think of yourself as a playoff team, you go take care of business in this game in which you're favored and your opponent is beleaguered with injuries, and instead you get absolutely trounced. You get trounced, and there's really no positive takeaways from it in any side of the ball. Maybe D. Alford walks away with his head held high, did a pretty good job against Ted McMillan. He still comes away with a few catches. There's just nothing that D can do about some of those. But stepping up into A.J. Terrell's shoes, thought he did a good job. But other than that, it was not good enough from pretty much anybody. So we're going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you've made it this far, I know it's painful, but we will talk to you guys later this week after we hear from Raheem Morris on Monday and with more players and coaches as the week progresses. So hang with us here on 929 The Game and Joe Patrick on football. Thank you so much. Until we talk to you guys next time.